Hey, what's going on? Daniel from These Seven Seas. Man, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I just want to share what I got in. Bam. Now, this, already says on the case is the Sharknivco Waka gills from 2022. Now, when you get a Sharknivco knife, sorry, I apologize if I'm not even saying the name correctly. This is the first time I'm actually learning about this brand in depth. But Sharknivco will come in a case like this, very similar to like a Brown Knives or like a Grimsmo. But let's open her up, see what's going on. So boom, like I said, this is my first Sharknivco knife, and you get the Waka right there. Look at that. I love that Sharknivco logo, and man, that's really cool. Now, before I get to the star of the show, if you open up the phone, you'll get a handwritten card, thank you card, and you'll also get the cert of authenticity. I think it's not a holy Waka. I think it's called a gills Waka, so I'm not sure why it says holy, but then other than that, it gives you the info on the knife, made in December of 2022. Now, so let's go ahead. And you know what I thought was a really special touch is this like melted wax seal with the logo on it. I think that's really dope. Anyways, let's go ahead and put this away and get to the star of the show. Now, like I said, this is my first Sharknivco. And I honestly was not very familiar with this brand or this knife. This is the Waka, the full size. I was familiar with the Koenig Mini Goblin, which is a collab between Koenig and Edison Barajas, who is the man behind Sharknivco. So I was familiar with that, but I've never handled the Mini Goblin or any of the Sharknivco knives. But when I saw this pop up, I was like, man, I love just the look of this knife, and I know that it is highly regarded in the knife community. I was like, you know what, let's give it a shot, right? So anyways, before we move on, definitely want to give you guys some size comparison to get your sense of the dimensions. Now, this is a good size knife, not too big, not too small. I believe the blade length is about 3.3 inches. And I believe there's a mini Waka. So the mini Waka, I think, is a 3-inch or sub 3-inch blade. But this is a perfect size, not too big, not too small. So to give you a sense, I got the Chris Reeve large Sebenza 21 right here. And as you can see, the Sebenza 21 is a little bit longer, maybe like a 1/4 inch longer. And then let me bring out the Cortex XL. This is the brown Cortex XL. Now, this is a little bit more comparable lengthwise. And let's do one of my all-time favorites. This is a Skiff Fugitive. And I think this is definitely very comparable in terms of length and dimensions. So let's go ahead and put all this away. Now, like I said, this is my first kind of foray into Sharknivco. And the first thing, honestly, that really stood out to me is the community. They have a really amazing Facebook community. The members are always just engaged, posting their different knives and just commenting on one another's posts. But you know what's even crazier is that the makers, Edison and especially Mariela, who is his wife, she's always engaged in the Facebook group. She's always posting stuff, always replying to other folks. And just a really phenomenal just engagement over there. And I've never seen that level of engagement in any knife community, to be honest. And so that really attracted me to this brand, because even before this knife came in, I want to learn more about it, right? So of course I joined their Facebook group, and man, I was like, man, this community is super dope, and so I was like, man, I could get behind that, and I love supporting makers and companies that really value their customers and really value the community that they create. You know what I'm saying? So there you go. Just a phenomenal community around Edison and Mariela Barajas. And I think honestly it's very reflective of their values, and just that they're not just about making a product, right? I mean, gotta say, this knife is phenomenal. But they're not just about that. You can see that they really do care about, us knife enthusiasts and our experience with one another and just around their products. And so phenomenal community. Now, the next thing I noticed just right off the bat is just this milling pattern is just insane. Now, this is the gills pattern, and what I want to point out, I'm gonna try to do my best to explain, right? But you know, just let's do a comparison here, right? So you got this Skiff Fugitive, which has this beautiful milling pattern, but it's just on, you know, it's like on almost a single plane, as you can say, right? It's just kind of on top of the scales. Boom, you know, I mean, this has some chamfers going on. It's a little bit more complex, but yeah, something like this, right? It's just kind of a flat, kind of a milling situation going on. But what I do want to show here is that, you know, you have this milling pattern, right? This section, but then you have areas of it where it goes all the way through, right? As you can see, and then right down through the middle, you got this like slab of titanium that they, you know, that is not milled all the way through. I don't know if I'm making sense at all, but it's just like, I don't know the complexity or the difficulty of doing something like this, but honestly, this seems a little bit more complex than something like this, right? Where it's just kind of a flat surface. This is like, you have like areas where it's just like, it's milled all the way through, and then you have this flat section. Just like, I don't know. I'm not a machinist. I can't say whether this is more complicated or not, but as a, you know, as someone that's a little bit, you know, probably naive, this looks definitely a little bit more complicated to execute. And just visually, it just gives it like a more multi-dimensional, like visual aesthetic. You know what I'm saying? So, man, that is just phenomenal. That is just beautiful. And of course, the inside is milled out, and it's not a super light knife. I would say it's probably clocking in at maybe like 3.5 ounces, maybe a little bit more than that. So I love that despite all this milling, it does still feel like a little bit of heft in the hand, and just feels like quality, you know. So there you go. I mean, everything else, the machining is just flawless. You know, you got the chamfers all around the handles. I mean, this is as phenomenal as of a craftsmanship that I've seen anywhere else, man. You know, just beautiful. Now, I did notice right off the bat, proprietary hardware, which I'm not a big fan of, but you know what? You know, it is what it is. I did notice that they do like these tool drops, I think once a month. So it's not like it's hard to get. So yeah, like when it comes up, folks can order the tool to take their knives apart, which is great. I love how they've given us the option to do that instead of just kind of being stuck with not being able to maintain our knives, right? What else can I say? I've carried it for a few days now, so I can't give out a full-on review, but man, I gotta say, the next thing I've definitely noticed, and I never thought I would ever notice this, but the lock bar tension is the most perfect lock bar tension I've ever experienced, right? Yeah, granted, it has amazing dialed in detent, action is phenomenal, but you know, when I first got this knife and I opened it up, I was like, man, something just feels different. Something sounds different. And it's not going to really translate through the camera all that well. But in the hand, right, it just felt like there was something like an extra magic sauce. I was like, what is it, right? It's not the action. The action is phenomenal. It's not the detent so much, because the detent's phenomenal. But it was like the sound, the acoustics of it is very like click. It's like very precise. That's the best way I could describe it. You know, but I was like, it's not just the acoustics. What is it? And I just realized, I think it's just the lock bar tension is literally perfection. And if you go to their YouTube channel, you know, he talks about like setting the lock bar tension, and honestly, it was kind of over my head. But I was like, damn, I think that's what it is. Like, they really figured out the perfect lock bar tension, because like, it's like the action's amazing, the detent is amazing, the acoustics are just very unique. And I was like, man, it's just the lock bar tension. It's just the feel. And I think you could only experience this when you actually have this knife in your hand, because you're not gonna be able to really see it on camera. It's a feeling. That's what I want to say. It's like this feeling that I've never really experienced. You know, I mean, I've handled a lot of really phenomenal knives, but it was like this feeling in the hand, the way yeah, I don't know. It's just a feeling. It just felt different. And I think it is the lock bar tension, right? Man, this knife is phenomenal. The action is, God, look at that. It's not guillotine drop shitty, but it's like very precise. Oh, I could like use that thumb flick. I could even do the middle flick, right? I could slow roll it, and you could also use that front flipper. Boom. I'm not a big like fan of front flippers. I'm not really good at it, but honestly, this design, I was like, oh, this is like actually pretty easy. You know, I don't look at that. I could actually use it. I could actually do it. No, other knives, I'll kind of like, it'll just be really clumsy and I'll drop the knife or whatnot. But this one is just like, boom. I was like, this is the first front flipper where I actually feel like very comfortable doing it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Check that out, man. Anyways, yeah, it's just, oh, it's so smooth. And then other thing I found out as I was kind of doing my research is that they don't have like bearing cages for all the different like bearings. It's kind of free floating in there. So if you're gonna take this knife apart, just know that it's gonna be just kind of there, and it might start to drop out. I think the way they kind of keep it all together is they use like a thicker like lubricant, I think. But again, I have not taken this knife apart. I don't have the tool for it, but honestly, I have no reason to take it apart. Because the blade centered, rock solid lockup, action is phenomenal. I'm like, man, forget it. I'm not gonna mess with this. But look at that. This knife is phenomenal. Now, one thing that was a little bit challenging was like figuring out what version this is, because there seems to be like different iterations. Like there was like a version 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. I don't know how many iterations are there, and I couldn't really tell the difference other than like the major changes that they made. It seems like they kind of made the jimping a little bit more tighter, a little bit more akin to like, I think the newer versions, at least from what I've seen, kind of look more like this. I think the older versions don't have this wedge and they use a different thumb stud. But aside from that, oh, and I think the pocket clip on the newer ones are a little bit more rounded off on the tip. This one's a little bit sharper. The newer one seems to be a little bit more rounded. But other than that, I think that's the only kind of changes that I've seen. They might have made some changes on the inside, but yeah, so there you go. So if you are kind of looking for a Waka and you're like, what version or what generation is it? Just kind of, you know, the telltale signs would be like, does it have a swedge or not? Does this have this thumb stud, or is it a different looking thumb stud? I think this is again from 2022. I think the newer iterations still use these thumb studs. And then also you could tell if you have a newer Waka if the jimping is tighter. This one's kind of more spaced out. But I think the newer ones, like I said, there's a little bit more tighter. It's a little bit more Chris Reeve-ish, right? I think they're still using the same proprietary tools from what I've seen. Oh, and then also, like I said, the pocket clip. If it's a little bit more rounded, I think it's the newer generations, right? So, yeah, but man, the Waka is a phenomenal knife. Like, this is the best thumb stud knife I've ever experienced, man. This is one of the knives I feel like it's really, on paper, it doesn't seem all that impressive, or if you see it on video, it's like, oh, it's another titanium knife, you know, and whatnot. But it's like one of those knives where you have to experience it in person. You have to feel it. You have to feel it when the knife opens up. You got to feel the action. You got to like get a close up and be able to just, and that's where you start to really appreciate this knife for what it is, you know. It's hard to just see it on camera and be like, okay, but no, honestly, guys, when I got it in hand, I was like, man, I could see now why this knife costs so much. Retail, like if you get a brand spanking new, I think you're gonna be paying like around $2,000. No lie. On the secondary, it's a little bit cheaper, but it ain't that much cheaper, you know. Yeah, these knives are definitely up there in price, but I could definitely see why. And I just love the silhouette of this knife. I think this knife just looks so beautiful. Like, just look at that, you know? And it just feels good in the hand. It feels very good in the hand. Very comfortable. And oh, one other thing I do want to mention, this gills pattern, I don't think it's not just for looks, because in hand, it does feel like the tactile feeling of it just adds grip. And so it just has that tactile kind of that feel. It just makes, it just locks the knife in. It almost feels like grip. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that was their intention, but man, it works, guys. It just locks the knife in the hand, and I think honestly, yeah, again, it visually is just phenomenal, very stunning. But there you go. There is kind of like my first impressions. Definitely will try to do a longer review if I have anything else to add. But man, if you have an opportunity to try a Waka, man, it's so worth it. I could see why the community is just so strong around this company. I could see why folks love this knife. It is so apparent. Once you get it in hand, you're like, okay, yeah, I could see why. But there you guys go. This is a Sharknivco Waka gills. And love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions. Drop them down below. And if you like what you're watching, feel free to give me a subscribe and a thumbs up. With that being said, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Take care now.